guys, Debbie here, back for another tutorial. Today I wanted to do a video to just kind of walk through the very basic first steps on setting up a document to make sublimation designs in Illustrator. Illustrator is probably my favorite program ever. I use Procreate and I use Photoshop and I use Illustrator and I use I use all of the Adobe programs, but Illustrator is my favorite. And as far as text tools go, it just doesn't get any better. Photoshop does some really good text stuff too, but it's different. I don't know why. It never comes as easy to me, I guess, and it seems to just kind of be a little bit slower. So I love Illustrator. If you're going to make a design in Illustrator, there are a few things that you need to know about getting it set up correctly. So I'm going to close out of this one so I get to this screen for you. So if you go to Create New, you're going to have these options over here to the side. So how I always set mine up is I do a 15 by 15 inch artboard. That is not you're not committing to that. My word's not coming for me. You could change the artboard size to whatever you want later, but that's just a starting point. I don't set up any sort of bleed. I just do the one artboard. But here's what's important. RGB color mode. So CMYK is meant for professional printers, and when you're doing sublimation, the sublimation printers that everybody is using are personal printers. So those printers are designed to already convert RGB into what it needs. So RGB color modes are what you want to set up your document as. I do the raster effects at 300 ppi. That can be changed later again, and you could toggle it back and forth. The higher the raster effects, the more resources on your computer it's going to take, so it might slow your computer down. So if you're doing something that's kind of complex, you could change it to the 72 for a while, but then bump it back up to 300 when you want to export your file. But I'm just going to start at 300. We're going to see how it does with the screen recording going on here. Okay, so we're just going to leave that as it is and hit Create. So in Illustrator, and maybe this is why I like Illustrator more than Photoshop, although I know you can do artboards in Photoshop, but it's still not quite the same. But in Illustrator, you have an artboard, which is very similar to Silhouette. You know, you have like the mat. What's nice about the artboard is you can work on some things, move some stuff aside, and just keep your artwork right here, and it'll only export what's on the artboard. So I really like that. Your workspace setup is really important because you need to know where everything is, and you want to have the things that you use most often kind of at your fingertips. I like using them set up where they pop out like this. If I drag this out, it'll make them a little bit bigger and it'll do different things. But I want to have as much space as possible to work with. So I like to have my navigator over here. In case you didn't know, you can click on anything that shows up in this preview area and it'll drop you there. So if you have a whole bunch of artboards going and you're over on one and you decide you want to just like bounce over to another spot, you can just click on the little navigator. But it also gives you the zoom in and zoom out. Very accessible. The layers are going to be the biggest thing that you mess with. So that's my biggest panel over here. And then I toggle back and forth between image trace, which I really don't use that often, but it is something I like to have handy. Character, which is your fonts, and the align tools, which I use all the time. Up here in document setup, if you click on that, you can choose a few things in here that make kind of the setup a little bit easier. So I like to have mine in inches. That's what we set up at the beginning. If you open up a document later and you realize it's giving you pixels everywhere, you can go back into document setup and change the units to inches. You just toggle it back and forth if you need to. But this right here, these transparency and overprint options are really handy if you decide to take advantage of those. So where I like to have mine is I put my grid size set to small and the colors set to dark. And I will show you what that does here. So I probably should have just opened up a design or something, but let's just, I'm just gonna drop some text here. So let's say we had some artwork going and there's some white in the artwork, but you know, you kind of want to double check on and see what you've got going on. So there's a white outline on this and you can't see it. So you can move it over here to the gray and then you could see it, which I know this isn't super relevant right now. A white border doesn't really hurt anything for sublimation. But there are times when, like when I'm trying to do a final file, I want to check what white areas I have, just in case somebody wants to use the file for a screen print, because then the white does matter, or layering it onto other clip art things or a background or something. So if it's something that I feel like, oh, somebody's going to put something behind this and I need to make sure that there's white behind so that the color is showing correctly, or we want a border around this so that, you know, there's just certain circumstances you want to see a little bit more what's going on. And that transparency grid does this. So it'll hide your artboards for you so you can see what's happening. When the default transparency grid settings are there, it's light enough that it's kind of hard to see the white. So I like to make those smaller and darker so that's easier to see. And then there is, up in preferences, if you go to general, this keyboard increment is kind of nice to have. It's how much your object moves when you click the little arrows on your keyboard. So just another little tip there that I like to do. So you can mess around with that and see what works better for you. But the key windows that you want to make sure that you have, so I talked about this whole bar over here, but I probably should go over some of these. A lot of them you won't use very often, but this one right here is appearance. So to get any of these, you go up to window and you just click on appearance. So if the check mark is next to it, it's out here somewhere already. So the appearance panel tells you kind of different attributes, changes, characteristics to your items that you're working on. This one above it is transparency. So sometimes you want to adjust the opacity, which you could do up here too, but this gives you the blending modes. So if you want to change it to multiply or overlay, that is nice to kind of have at your fingertips. So I have that transparency one up there. I also use it for the masks, but that's a different video. Artboards. So this is probably why I love Illustrator so much. So you can work through and make like different variations of the same design, get them all laid out on artboards. So let's say we want to make another color of this. So over here in your left menu, there's a little tool that says Artboard tool. So when you select that, see now your artboard is highlighted. If you hold down the Option or Alt key on your keyboard and then grab that and move it, it copies it. You can even hold down Shift while you're going and it'll keep it on the same line, so they're all lined up. But that will give you another artboard, and you could do that over and over and over, and you'll see them pop up over here. And then you can make your changes, do a different color or do another phrase or whatever you're working on. And if you name these artboards, so let's say it's, okay, when you double click it zooms in, but let's say you have yellow, and then you go blue, and then you do red. When you export your files, so if you go to export as, you get a window that pops up here. The files will be named what your main document is. So I was working on the font tutorial, so this is what's showing up as recent. So the main document I did for that was called Fonts Tutorial. And then I named the artboards with the numbers because I wanted them numbered for how I was going to put them on the website. And then there's names after them. So if you go to Ping File and you click Use Artboards and you do All, and then here you choose, for website graphics I had it set up different, but when I'm actually doing something you're going to be printing, you set it to 300, Art Optimized, which is very important. I've gone through the testing on this. It makes a difference. And transparent background. And then you hit OK, and it'll export all three of those as separate files, which is awesome. So those are the export settings that you need to know. It was up at, I have a hotkey set up, little keyboard shortcuts, which are amazing, and you really should take some time to go through and learn some of those, or set some up if you need to. But I do is, so it's export as is what I went to. So when you're in the menu of Illustrator, and this is true for all of the Adobe products, these little keystrokes that show up next to things in the menu, those are the hotkeys. So if there's something that you do often, take a minute and go look at it in the menu and try to memorize it. So copy, paste, there's a okay, so you could do this is just a cool trick that I didn't know until I was using Illustrator for a while. So if you hit copy, okay, I just hit Command C on my keyboard to copy, and then you go click on another artboard and you hit edit, paste in place. It will paste it in the same exact spot on that artboard. So if you make some changes to one but you want to like make the changes to the others, you could do that. Or if you hit cut, so you make it go away for a second, and then you go up to edit, paste on all artboards, it'll drop them on all of them. So that's a huge time saver. So hotkeys for copy, paste, there's keyboard shortcuts, I guess they're not hotkeys. The paste in place, the paste on all artboards, those are super handy to have. I do really like their font sorting ways of doing things. When you go into the characters, and that's why I have the character panel over here. So there is one up here too, but when you go to look at a font, it drops in front of your work. So I ignore that one. I guess I could move it, but it's handy sometimes if I'm just going to change the font size or something. But if you're browsing fonts, this is super inconvenient to have it drop in front of what you're working on. So that's the main reason why it's over here off to the side. But you can filter them by classification and by some of these properties, which I feel like are kind of new. I don't think they used to always do that. But I click on that for script all the time. And then you get these little previews. I have an outline on that, so that looks like crap, but it's okay. So you could scroll through and see all the script fonts. If you have one that you just have a tendency to use often and you want to remember it, you can hit this little star. Oh, it's bumping that off my recording, isn't it? Well, I'll show you up here. There's a little star. See that star? So that'll add it to your favorites lists. And then when you click on the little star up here, it shows you all of your favorites. Okay, it's actually filtering it by script and favorites, but then you could just hit clear all and it'll take all those filters away. One of my favorite things is when you find a font that you really like. Okay, I need to take that stroke off so you can see. Okay, this is a great font. I was just looking this up for someone earlier. It was on one of my designs that I released last week. So this font is just cool. Okay, I really like the wispiness of it. when you find a font that you like, but you're not really sure if it's perfect, and you want to look at some other ones, this little squiggly equal sign here will show similar. And then you can see other ones that kind of are visually similar to that font, which is awesome. Totally awesome. Saves so much time to be able to kind of narrow down your fonts to a manageable assortment to look at and help you decide. If you are going to work on a design and you want to start pulling in clip art, there are two ways that you could do that. You can, I'll see if it will let me open this because Dropbox has been stupid. And apparently all my stuff isn't actually on here yet, so I'm going to try to grab one. See, we're not synced. Apparently we have one missing in here. That one's synced, so I'll pull that in. You could drag and drop them in, okay? Up here in the upper left-hand corner, it shows a link. So even dragging and dropping it in, it still will link it. And if at any point you want to swap that out with another graphic, which is really handy for things like the cows where they're all the same size, but there's a little bit different variations of them, you can click on this and hit relink and then browse to the new one that you want. And when you hit place, it'll drop it in the same exact size, place, rotation, you know, so you don't have to replace it strategically. So linking is great. You could drag and drop them in, or you can go up to File, Place, and then browse to them that way. It'll do the same thing. So you bring in your artwork, you can arrange them in front or behind the text. That's where the layers come in handy. You can right click and do arrange and send to back, or do the hotkeys, the shortcuts. You see those are in there. I, more often than not, will just move them over here with the layers. And I really like to label my things, but mostly because I end up with like a million artboards and super complex stuff, and if I don't label and kind of group things around, it becomes a hot mess. But it's just handy to do. It helps you kind of keep track of things. So I feel like that's probably the basic for making sublimation designs. You don't have to do the 15 by 15. You could do 13 by 19 if you wanted, because that's the paper size, which is up here. When you click on the artboard tool, you see the sizing up here, so you could just change it, or you could just drag it. I usually just kind of get somewhere around there, and then when I'm all done, I will tuck these edges right up to the edge of the design, so that when it's exported, you don't have a whole bunch of white space around it that you're dealing with. Or let's say I just wanted it to wrap around, well, that's not a good example because this is one of those with those huge text box. Okay, let's just do this. Let's say I want it to fit to your image. If you hit Command Shift F, that may have been one that I created. Object, artboard, fit to selected art. So I'm not sure if that's a default shortcut or not. So you'd want to go in and check that. But fit to selected art is a very handy tool. When you're all done, you can just highlight all of your stuff and click on that, and it'll shrink that artboard down. The only time that does stupid things is if you have text that you have not converted to paths yet. See how all this white space down here? So we do that, and then that's not up against the text. So if you really want that to go up right next to the text, you have to right click and create outlines. You lose your ability to edit it, but it will go right up next to the text at that point. Oh, last thing, color profile. You need to have a certain color profile used, and so you don't, there's not like a huge difference that you see in the file when you're doing the color profile. The color profile is just the one that is the most like commonly basic across all machines. So when I sell a file, your computer will know how to handle it, but the printers also have a better job of processing that color profile. And again, this is just something I've done a stupid amount of tests on. Like, I printed the same graphic in 10 different color profiles and then sent them to people and sent them back, and this is the one that just stays the happiest from beginning to end. So it is under Edit, and you go to Assign Profile, and it's right here, Profile, and it's this one with sRGB and a bunch of letters and numbers after it. That's what I always tell everybody. I mean, there's going to be a whole bunch of profiles on your computer depending on the software that's on your computer. You know, there's other programs have a tendency to sneak their own little profiles on there, and your printer will do that too. But this sRGB with all the letters and numbers after it, 'cause I've never memorized all of those, I guess I should. That is the color profile to use to have everything print out accurately, as accurately as it can. I mean, everybody's monitor is a little bit different, the printers are a little bit different, the ink's different, the software is different, so you will never get a perfect match of your colors. It just doesn't happen. Once you get everything set up how you want it, with like your document and the transparency grids and set to inches, you've got the color profile, you could save that as a template. So you go up to, oops, I'm not in there, File, Save as Template. For some reason it has some privacy permission controls where it won't let me save it in like the actual templates folder right off the bat, but you pick a location to save it, where you'll come back to it. You can name it what you want. So I have one that's called Sublimation Designs, and it's already sized and it's got the color profile and all that stuff in there. So just a handy little trick once you do get one set up is you can save it as a little template, and then next time you want to make something, you just open New from Template and Subdesign, and it pops in with everything that I want. I love you all. Thank you for watching. Like, follow, subscribe, all that jazz.